So I know it's after lunch and it's pretty dark in here. We've got an hour and 30 minutes to talk, and so I see a lot of younger people in the crowd, newer in their careers. So raise your hand if you're a student. Awesome. Architectural, okay. Anyone wants to get into the MEP, the trade side of it, or you want to be architects, engineers? It's all architectural. Okay, cool. And everybody else in the room, engineer, architect, owner, MEP? Okay, a little bit. So please stop me anytime. I'd love to make this an interactive conversation. I'm going to talk more from the MEP subcontractor side, but all of this, what I do, goes into architecture engineering. It's all about stacking technologies together and working at it. Working out. So a little bit, who am I? I sound really good when you write it on paper. My whole career has been in the construction field. Worked for a family business, about 1,000 people. I was a VP of operations, was in charge of fabrication, lean, IT, safety, procurement, our fleet. My background, really how I approach jobs is how can we look at a process and improve it and really share information and communicate? What do we do on a day-to-day basis? We're really trying to communicate or convey a message between multiple parties, be it you're in the same office and you might be on the other side of a wall, or you might be in another building. As you get into larger jobs, you might be in the other side of the world. So dealing with different cultures, and how does technology enable us to communicate in a more streamlined manner so that we're not bombarding people with emails and text messages and phone calls all throughout the day, but we're using a process to help us have a systematic approach. So that's my background. I love lean, I love BIM. How can you stack lean, BIM, and technology together to have a great workflow? Come from a family business, so what does that mean? That means you're dealing with different emotions and not always the structure, the gut feeling. And what I want to say today is you can have the approach you learned in school really into your career as well. So a little bit overview. I'm going to talk about what Victaulic. So Victaulic is a manufacturer of pipe, valves, and fittings. Or not pipes, valves, and fittings. And, why do I have a 115-person team? What have we learned? How are we working on change management within our own culture and within our industry and sharing best practices? Talking about the changing responsibilities. Earlier today, we talked about some contractual methods that are changing, but what BIM is enabling us to do is really blur lines between traditional roles, be it the project exec, the project manager, the superintendent, the shop floor person for fabrication, the estimator. When we're sharing information and making it easy, we're creating new work responsibilities. And the data is in one team, but it's consumed by another team. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Have examples, and then some successes and some lessons learned. My team wants to implement 2 new pieces of technology a year. We're pretty advanced and pretty, I would say, we try to put a lot in our team and try to get a lot implemented. What happens is it's not always successful, but how do we learn from those failures? And how do we have a implementation plan? So we have discovery plan. Is it a good piece of software or technology? How do we create an implementation plan for that software or technology or process? How do we have that maintenance phase? Making sure that we're living up to our SOPs and our standards and that we're getting our ROI, our return on investment for that software, technology, or process. And then an exit strategy. So what if the next great thing comes out? How do we build in a culture that is okay with change and understanding that financially we're going to get our return for this investment and then we're going to have something next? Because a lot of you guys coming into your careers, I'm sure you don't want to do it the same way that your grandpa did it. And we have to deal with that as a changing workforce. So what did we used to do? I actually, for my 16th birthday, I got an electric eraser. Some of you guys might not even know what erasers are anymore. So like that was cool when I was 16 because I would draft for, on the side for the family business. But what we did and what we still do is a highly manual paper-based process. And just because you buy a computer does not mean that you've replaced paper. You've made it digital. I take notes all the time on my tablet. It's still paper. It's just not, it's a digital piece of paper. So highly manual, it's got errors. It's just by nature, you're going to deal with a lot of people, and people are good at nature, but create errors. So you have a lot of redundancy in that. You've got a lot of checking. When I came into my company, we had a 40-plus year veteran in our department that would check to make sure that the computer takeouts were correct. So I was blown away, and top-notch talent. This guy had more talent in his left pinky than I've learned yet in my career. And he would sit there and he'd check the computer outputs. So I'm going to talk about how I still see that today. I travel 90% of my time, and I see it in every purchasing department, in every fab shop, in every engineering office. There's somebody checking somebody else's work. So where can we go from a digital solution? How can we program? How can we allow the software and processes to avoid that manual check so we can use the talent where it's needed? And, I always say about this, significantly faster at lower cost. What's happening in our industry is it's faster. It's a higher level of quality. It's not always a lower cost. So when you hear that BIM, who thinks BIM costs more money than traditional coordination? So normally half of the room raises their hand. Sometimes it's even more. They're like, oh my God, BIM's going to cost me a lot of money. Normally it's the younger guys in the room that say, no, BIM's going to save you money. So I can tell you in my team, if I charge for traditional coordination, it costs more than BIM. I'm charging you more for you to send me 1 billion emails than I am to have me pay for the software and you use it pretty much because of that errors that we create, the lack of data analysis that we can't do in the paper-based. We can do it, but we just don't have time to do it. So that's what we're going to talk about. We saw this earlier today in the first session. And what I love about this slide is, the colors mean are they adopted or not, but one of the most thought leaders in our industry in BIM and lean and fabrication is Australia. What would you think is interesting about Australia? It takes a long time to get a valve, a piece of structural steel. Anything that you miss, it's a long time to get it on a slow boat from somewhere if they want it. What's interesting, it's a highly union, high cost environment, but they also share labor because there's not a lot of labor. It's pretty similar to Canada in the amount of major cities that there are, and then a vast amount of territory in between that there's mining involvement. So I always look about Australia. They're small and they're on the other side of the world, but they're leaning towards, they're not saying, hey, the government has to tell me to do this, but as a collective, the contractors and the engineers and the architects have gotten together and say, we just want this. It's going to make our lives easier. So that's what's interesting about Australia. If you look at Singapore, they're a very small country, population, a lot of buildings, a lot of amazing architecture that goes on, but they have a minister that's in charge of construction, and they can force it down. At the contractor level, they're no difference than if you're in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, or in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan. The contractors are still really strongly paper-based, and they're looking for people to help them learn what to do. So, what's the evolution? This is standard today. Hand coordination. You go You go to a job site or you go to an office and somebody pulls out a piece of paper and they mark it up. What I say is, I'm not saying that this should be 100% eliminated, but if this is the method of communication for that workforce, then do it. But it should be really quickly transcribed back in and into the model. So what my team does is, if someone's still paper-based, our process is we immediately go put it into the model. And that's a little different. You're like, oh, that's a lot of money. I could just fill out my purchasing order right from there. I could go build it on the site right from there. Well, we'll talk a little bit about why we model everything, because it's repeatable and I can check and I can see if there's a quality issue. So later on in the conversation, I'm going to give you guys some real life examples about how long it takes us to do this. I wouldn't do it. At the end of the day, I only have so much manpower on my team and so much money that we can spend. But what this allows me to do is, it allows me to have a coordinated, I can coordinate it if I want. I can coordinate it with the trades that are internal to me, so between my own departments or on the job. We can run clash detection. Do you guys know what Revisto is? Ever used in school or anything? So we use, and I'm going to talk about software names, but it's just what my team uses. There's many alternatives out there on the market. But we can bring it into Revisto. Who's here had to do a log of all the changes on their job in Excel? You guys had to do that yet? You guys will probably one day, you'll learn. But what does a paper-based log give you? Well, it's typically sitting on one person's computer, or it's sitting on a local drive, and somebody is copying that spreadsheet and saving different spreadsheets on their own drives. And I'm going to tell you that internally, before we switched to some different softwares, we had 250 folders for one job. And I thought, and we had a process, believe me, we had a nice process flow map, but we had 250 folders because everyone wanted to keep their own version of the truth, to make sure that if there was an issue, they could go back and say, oh, no, I'm not going to get in trouble because I had the right version. It changed somewhere else. And then we're going to talk about, fabrication. So what I think globally, if you go back, to this slide about where BIM is being done, why do we want to use the process of BIM? Why do we want to use a 3D modeling software similar to Revit? It's because our industry is going to fabrication and modularization. A lot of these countries on these maps have leapfrogged other geographies because they've skipped in the fab shop fab spools, where it's just a piece of pipe, a valve, and a coupling on it. They've gone to racks and skids and bathrooms and full floors. And that's where we're going. We're changing those practices and saying, how can we create a modular environment? So I think Marriott did their first modular hotel in like 1975, 1980. It's not new. It's just not widely accepted. And why do you guys think that modularization didn't take off, in the 80s? Most of the time, they said they looked like boxes. I didn't want a square box. Modularization in the past made people think about what 70s architecture was. A lot of concrete, a lot of brick, a lot of squares, and I don't want that. So if you think, hey, modularization, it's a little modern, it's a little out there, I don't want that. It's not unique enough for me. And now where we're going with advancements in software is architects can design almost anything. And we can decide from an MVP side, is it constructible? So the collaboration between the architect, the engineer, the owner, and the subs, we can go from concept to constructability. One of the most unique projects I worked on was an arch, literally just over a highway in Qatar, and the building hung from the arch. So we had to get plumbing and fire protection and electrical to hang there. Ultimately, they scrapped the building because oil went down. But they dug foundations, and we had to find a way to get all of our services there. So it's similar to like what we saw yesterday. How do you keep the historical nature of a building but still preserve and make new things? So modularization is definitely changing. What's at the base of BIM? So BIM's a process. In order to implement the process, you have to be able to have the software and the components to implement BIM. So really where we're starting today is with content. If you don't have the virtual representation of this table or that chair or the coupling or the valve, it's very hard to execute the process. Junk in, junk out. So where our industry has really gone in the last couple of years is making sure that there are content, there are so many different companies and websites that have free or for free content so that you can have a constructible BIM model and share the data. And we're not just talking about geometry. So 3D representation is not what we're talking about, but the part number, the link to the submittal, the link to the cut sheets, all of that in the BIM data. And that's where, as a manufacturer, Victaulic, we've been supporting 26 different software platforms for about 20 years. And every year we get requests from contractors and from owners to say they want a little bit more data in there. They want the mill certs. They want to know what the, not just what the operating pressure of it is, but the torque requirement of the bolt, where the bolt came from on some industrial projects. So all of that data can go into that piece of content. And then you're looking at lean construction practices. Does anyone know can you tell me what lean is? You guys heard about waste reduction? Just air proofing, having a process so that you don't do the same thing and create the same outcome if it's wrong. And a lot of times in construction, what we do is we say we're going to fix it in the field. And by fixing it in the field, what we saw with the graph earlier today was the further you're out from the design, the more it's going to cost you on the job site. So if we know that the content is correct, how can we identify those potential errors up front? So I'm going to talk about how we're using virtual reality, augmented reality, and good old-fashioned post-mortem conversations with our teams to make sure that what went wrong once can't go wrong again, because we're going to update the process and build a check into the software. So this is just a video what we did with a customer on a job to show a little bit about, if you think BIM takes more time and you think 3D modeling and fabrication is longer, here's an instance where it was required because the job was in a bind.
.414 Light Street is a 44-story residential project in downtown Baltimore on the Inner Harbor. When we took over the project, another mechanical contractor had failed, and we were about 9 months late starting on the job. We were immediately behind in drafting and virtual construction, and we needed help. We reached out to Victaulic to help us with this mechanical space. It was the perfect spot to get them involved because it was pretty much just a Victaulic mechanical room, and they did a great job.
So it was obvious upon initial review of the project, the mechanical room was going to be one of the areas that was going to be very tightly constrained just because of the size of it and the amount of systems that were going to be necessary to be installed. So we went out to Victaulic to find out what potential software opportunities were out there to help expedite the coordination effort. Victaulic brought to their means and abilities to use Revit software to do a full-fledged coordination with the backgrounds that we already had received from the architectural and structural engineering firms.
Victaulic and Poole & Kent had teamed up in the fabrication process. Autodesk Revit allows you to add add-ins. We had used VicTools for Revit. That fabrication add-in is what we use to produce all the Victaulic fab spools.
Fab spools look very well. I mean, they came in, we ended up getting the fabrication in and through the shop as fast as we could. Everything worked out nice with the fabrication drawings.
Vic impacted our build schedule. In a way, it was beneficial to us because we were able to get the material already pre-cut, pre-packaged, and labeled for the project. It came down, we were able to build the room in 85 days, which was a 10-month turnaround on the entire job. The general contractor, the owner, didn't believe it was going to be possible, but we were able to make it happen with the help of it.
Autodesk Revit was essential in Victaulic being able to complete our fabrication spools on time, allowing Poole and Kent to complete their project on time.
So what was really interesting about that project was you can watch it over and over again. What was interesting about that project is that they were very late. A contractor has a world-class drawing team, world-class fabrication team, and they needed they didn't have Revit capabilities in-house. So standard practice today in some of our industries is we'll model it in 3D CAD or fabrication or whatever their modeling software is, and then we'll pay somebody to change it into Revit and make that the end deliverable. And they realized that they couldn't work within their flow if they did that. So by using and identifying a different software and identifying somebody that could partner with them, it was able to meet their goals. And I think that's what's big about our industry today, is there are so many people out there willing to share information. There's online user groups, and there's Autodesk University. They have a conference in Las Vegas every year around U.S. Thanksgiving, so it's November, third week in November every year. But there's all these different groups like CanBIM that are here to help you learn the process. So that change management is an internal thing you have to do in your company, but to learn it, the technology is not that hard. My team switched. So when we switched over 5 years ago, we were an 80-person team, and I count everything. So I know my team's a little bit of an anomaly because I count bid to actual on every drawing job that we do, and we lost 1/100% over the course of the year. I am not saying we brought every job in on target, but if you took all of our jobs we did that year, it came down to 1/100%. And those is when you have to use the data to go back and have that proactive conversation with the team members to understand it's like, yeah, there might be a time where we're working a Saturday or we're working a little extra or we might push out a deliverable. But overall, over 80 people, over 120 projects, it was 1/100th of a point that we were over. So I take that down to a rounding error. I couldn't say if the software change really created that anomaly, but I used it as a way to say, wow, we didn't lose 10% productivity. We didn't lose 20% productivity. But I did have about 20% of my hours that year where we put to training. And if you looked at my report and you were my boss and you're like, what do? You got these guys in a classroom every day all day long? And that's not what we did. But we put things to training when we know that someone actually is going into a classroom environment to learn something and coming out and is not proficient at it. So 414 Light Street, let's take that in. We don't have the rights to talk about the hospital, but it's a very large hospital in Canada somewhere that was just finished. And the engineer on the project wanted to use, it was a Revit job. They didn't have all the expertise there. So they said, hey, I need somebody to help me be efficient using Revit. What my team did is we went in and trained them how to use Revit. We then went in with the contractor and we said, well, we'll train you too, and let's get the engineer and the contractor together if possible. We couldn't always bring them in together physically, so virtually. Let's have the same training so no one can say I didn't know this or you didn't teach me this. And then actually for the contractor, we ended up doing some of the modeling because they had oversold some of their resources. But it really shows you how if you think up front, you can make it work. But 414 Light Street they were ready. The dirt was moved, the building was up, the owner was ready to move in. So you can have a really pre-planned environment, or you can have it where it's last minute. It really can work both ways. it's different. Sometimes last minute is easier because you have less time to fight change. And so on this hospital job, what it taught us is, we like to say we're one of the thought leaders in BIM and technology in the industry is, well, how can we use all of that data from the projects? Right now, we look at it by a project basis, or we used to. I'm going to talk a little bit about, coming up, about how we now try to aggregate all of our jobs together so that we know what we used, when we modeled it, how we modeled it, and how we can take those components and make them into more assemblies. So that's just a standard assembly. So we want to look at the data and break it down by building type, geography. Eventually, 3 years from now, we'll get into individual code for each municipality. So what did we have to do in order to make these advancements? We had to create what our deliverables were. We had to have that common language so that everyone on the job, when we were saying something, there was a definition and a picture that went with it. And I'll show some examples of those deliverables. If you don't show someone a picture, sometimes it's hard to just understand what you're talking about. So what I loved about CanBIM when they gave me the presentation, it said 9 places. And it said, put a picture here, use the picture, don't use words. And that's what we've tried to do a lot in our deliverables. Talk about methods of communication, keeping the scope. Have you guys ever heard of nice guy syndrome? So what I like to call nice guy syndrome is someone calls you up and you say, sure. Somebody calls you up the next day and they say, sure. And all of a sudden you've just said a lot of sures, and it is no longer your initial scope, but you're working around the clock because everyone's nice. And I'm not saying don't be nice, but what we're trying to do with the software is to know when we can, and to sometimes to just know, hey, it's not the option right now, or it is an option, but you want to delay a time frame. Also, a lot about the process is, what do you do when there's an issue? Not a lot of people up front in the beginning of a job want to define what they're going to do when there's an issue and what is an issue. So in my team, we have a bulleted point list of what is an issue. So if we are tracking 5% over on the hours, that's an issue. If we're tracking 5% or a dollar value over on the cost, that's an issue. And then we have clearable, definable resolutions, or who should get involved when there are those issues. And what we've built into our system, I'll show you just some red flags. It just says, hey, you got to ask the question. What we also do, and I talk about those roles changing, is those budget to actuals. Today, finances is everyone's responsibility, not just the person, not just the estimator's job or the project exec. So from a drawing team, what does Revit and BIM and all that data allow us to do? It allows us to run, and in my team we do a weekly, budget to actual. We run diameter inches of pipe, we run product cost, and we put it to a time. And when we started this 3 years ago, it took 3 hours every Friday to do it. Now, it's 5 minutes. 10 minutes if you walk away and go get a drink during the middle of it. But that's something that saying, okay, here's the defined objective and the deliverable that we say is necessary, and spending the time to air-proof and lean out that process. And at the end, keep it visual. This is an example of one of the documents we created to share with our customers to say, this is how we will share issues with you. So every one of our projects goes out. In our kickoff meeting, we actually talk about, okay, here's our collaboration tool, here's a seat of that collaboration tool. We'll pay for it for you so you use it. We'll teach you on it. And here's why you'd want to use it. Instead of this, in the old days, this was an Excel spreadsheet. So this is just our sample pack that goes out, because a lot of times when you're dealing with contractual methods, you just don't know what you're dealing with. So every job, we cloud over what we're doing. If we say, I love it when we talk about LOD 200, 300, 325, 327, 444. Like, people have made their own versions of LOD that go back to nothing. So what does a picture do? A picture shows you what we're going to give you and how it's going to look, and it's going to be standard. So one thing about our industry is this document can look a million different ways. What we've done is we said, okay, this is, you would not know if one of my team members in Richmond Hills or one of my team members in Easton, Pennsylvania did this document. It's just standard. And the computer spits it out. And that's why we want to use talent where it's best served. Having someone spend all their time rotating and putting views on a sheet that someone may or may not use in a fabrication shop or on the job site, is there any value to it? I'll show later on where we're working with another software company where we're actually eliminating the paper if you want to eliminate the paper. So I would say the biggest change that we made, and that the data and good content allowed us to do, is we switched from manual takeoffs to model-based takeoffs. Year to date, I've done 900 models for estimates. So a manual takeoff, say I'm just doing the mechanical spaces for a large hospital, would have taken me about 30 to 40 hours. It'd be about a week's worth of work. By the time we did the takeoff, we checked it. And you guys know how you check a manual takeoff on a job? You do another manual takeoff of the job. There's no way to check it. People will spot check it, and you'll get a guy with a pencil and do that. But we switched to model-based estimates. And that was a change, because on average for a hospital, and I'm not talking distribution, depending on how large the job is, we don't always do the model for it, but we'll do a running meters worth of pipe, and we've broken it down to a calculation. But on average, whole hospital, all the mechanical spaces where you've got 80% of your money in it, 26 hours. When I started this, my boss believed me. He was like, no, that can't be it. You're like, no. I'm like, no, it's 26 hours, but it's a completely different person doing it. So in the same amount of time, I'm getting the deliverable, but with a model-based estimate, I have to tie one of my top estimators. I have to change his and her practices, that they have to wait until they get the model from one of the drafting team members. And what we had to do here, for a model-based estimate, we had to create that deliverable, that common language. So we got, with our top estimators, we sat in a room and we came up with what we said is our basis of estimate. And it's our basis of estimate by geography, and it's our basis of estimate by building type. And it says what your product choices are going to be, what your material options are. Like, okay, can you use stainless? Does it have to be copper? Can it be carbon? So we came up, and we now have a basis of estimate, so we can do jobs anywhere in the geographies that we work in, which are worldwide. So my basis of estimate for the UK is not my same as basis of estimate for Australia, which is not the same as if it's for the West Coast in the US. Difference between Canada and the US is you use more carbon up here, we use more copper down there. There's no reason why. It's still approved. So we came up with that basis of estimate, and we gave that to the drafts person that now interprets the contractual documents based on that, and our top estimator can then do his or her data analysis at the end. So simple change that you would think, but I had to find drafting hours where I didn't. And now I'm able to do more with the estimating team, but it's a different process because in the beginning, change management, they didn't think that that drafts person would make the same assumptions they did. So, but with a model, you can see it. I think that's what's key that we're really doing. So this is a live one. This is our estimate to our actual. And what the technology allows us to do, and since we have a model-based estimate, we can overlay them. So if you don't do this today, or if you want to see, design changes, you don't have to start at the estimate. You can start once you're through, a couple phases of construction, and you can overlay those. And this could be duct, this could be structure, this can be anything. But you can see where those changes are. So we do it from a visual perspective, and then we also have a spreadsheet where it gives us diameter, inches, and product, and those other key financial metrics that we look at. But one of the best things that I think is, let's see. Oh, did it pop up? Sorry, this computer doesn't have 3D PDFs on it, maybe. Oops. So we also use 3D PDFs just to communicate information. We're talking about, you got high tech and you have low tech. So just sharing this out on a 3D PDF where someone can walk around and go see on the job site what they're supposed to see and what they're not supposed to see using Acrobat Reader or Navis Viewer on your phone or your tablet. We do that. And then we also use augmented reality where you can actually go in and, it pops up in front of you. But how do you go from this, which, who thinks that this is really quick and easy? We should probably say it by age group. So most people would be like, oh, this is so simple. I can get a piece of paper out. I got a pen in my pocket. I can mark it up, take that back, take a picture of it, and they can work on it. This is my handwriting, and you can tell that I failed handwriting class. So what happens? No one ever can read anybody's handwriting, and you've got to go back and you have to interpret. You've got to call that person up and say, oh my gosh, what was that dimension? What did it mean? I'm always fascinated that when you go to construction sites, there's more cardboard and pencils than anywhere else, and everything comes back with a Sharpie marker on a cardboard. But what can you do here? This is this, but it's the same job. I should have had the same image in the electronic form. So this is a program that we purchase, and you talk about that change management. How do you get from this to this? Well, first what we did is we let the field do this, and then the person in the office had to go log everything. So it wasn't what the program was intended for, but it got us to know here, besides me counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all those things that I've got to fix, this now gives me a report of how many open items that we have and how long those items have been open for and who they're assigned to. So the change management is, hey, pass the least resistance. Have somebody just data input it then. Now where we are with having repeat customers in a couple years down our journey, everyone likes it because it's easy. It gives the picture. Up here, what's interesting is you can't see it on this one, but we put all of our 2D and our 3D documents in it. So if you have access to every document on that job if you want. What we really try to do is say, let's not overload people with too much information, because analysis paralysis, you'll get people to look at stuff until it's too long. But now we have this. We're actually working with the software company to say, this is great, but it's really a project-by-project basis. You can see how many issues you've had. It notifies the person if an issue's been out for too long. But I've got 120 open projects. Me at my level, I don't want to see, every single issue. I just want to know if we're closing them in time. And that's really where I see our industry going, is that 3 years ago it wasn't a possibility, and I think at their user group in November they're going to say they haven't. So all we did was ask for a dashboard view. So who's a gamer? You guys all play video games. Okay. So Revit's cool if you've been in the industry and like you thought 2D was good. So going to 3D, that's awesome. But if you want somebody to come into our industry, modeling, I mean, I don't personally enjoy it myself, but what we're looking at is, from a training perspective, how do we use gamification to attract people into our industry, to train our industry? So the fire local in Toronto just called us up and said, hey, I'd love to teach our guys virtually how to trim out valves before we go into the shop environment and we trim out the valves. And so what we've been working on the last couple of years is bringing in students like yourselves. And what we do is we have them put the pump build together in the office. They play the game. They model it in Revit. And then they build it. And what that allows you to do, it brings a level of safety into it. So we're not putting you into, with tools before you're ready for the tools, but also gives you that ability. If you could virtually put it together and you could build that virtual plan before you actually went out to the job site, you're that much more prepared. So this is today. We have this as training in our team. You see top level architects and engineers using it for some things, but I would say 5 years from now, Unity and Autodesk have a partnership. This is going to be commonplace. This isn't like, wildness. We built the first round of this with an intern, 19. We didn't want him to go back to uni because he was so smart, and he built it in 20 hours. We now have a couple more iterations of it. It took us 300 hours. So the time investment to teach the guys how to use it and the talent that we had access to, this isn't a lack of talent. I'm sure some of you guys, if you code, you probably could build something similar to this. So why do I show this? It's about stacking different technologies on top of each other. You have Revit, you have Revisto that we use, we have Faro scanning, we use something called Visual Live for augmented reality. There's a lot of software and hardware out there and different technologies that you can use today, but individually, you get some return. But when you stack those on top of each other, you get a huge bang for your buck. So this is where I was talking about from a document management perspective. Long before I came to Victaulic, we had a flow chart we had flow charts and process maps. We were so ineffective. We literally had 250 folders, and we went to 27. And I will say, guys, we're no different than any other, architect, engineer, contractor out there. I bet you if you counted how many folders you had and how many times people were saving the same document, you'd get to a similar number. Our estimating team had their own sheets and never shared them with the once they were sold. It was like, this is my information, you can't have it, you've got to call me, you got to give me a bottle of bourbon or your firstborn child, and it wouldn't give you the info. So there was some change management that went through, and we had to say, okay, everyone's on the same platform. One thing that is big with change management is you're going to show your issues. And showing an error or showing a mistake, it's much better than covering it up, in my perspective. It's not about saying, no, this person did something wrong. It's about fixing it. So we all make mistakes. If somebody says they don't, they're wrong. But so here's what we did. We changed over. We're using the BIM 360 platform. You could see where, here we had our paper-based process. We looked out on the market and saw what there was available, what cost point could we afford for the team, and did that analysis. We then said, okay, how will our internal tools work with it? Is there any need for programming? Is there any need for duplicate data entry? And now where we are today is one source of the truth. So I talked about having that exploratory discovery phase, that implementation phase, that maintenance and building upon that technology. Well, we signed a 3-year contract. So year 2 next year, I have to decide if it's a go or no go to kill the software, because it takes time. So what we do, it pops up on our Outlook calendar that says it's time to review if we are going to stay with it or not. So simple process. The day we sign a contract, we put a couple email alerts into our calendars and our master calendar, and it tells us, hey, it's time, and we highlight months by those phases. And it's so simple, easy, and visual, and we just know that when you have a project, what are we going to use? Because next year, there might be something better or something less expensive or something more widely used. So we want to have that understanding. Who here's been on a scan or scanned a project before? Okay. I would say most underutilized tech in our industry is scanning. So the United Association of Pipe Fitters every year for Canada, the US, Scotland, I think, Ireland and Australia, comes to Michigan, and there's a couple thousand trainers, and every year there's like 7 people that sign up for the scanning class. Total point layout for hanger inserts, classes are full. Scanning classes, I cannot figure out why people don't sign up for this. So I'm a big supporter of scanning technology, because who wants to go to this job site with a tape measure or a laser and write down documents that you're just going to question yourself if it was the right, I was on a job site once and the guy said, your measurement and my measurement were wrong. I go, we did them together side by side. You're only questioning it because I was right at the end. And what the picture gives you is an easy way to go back and pull this. And it gives you a set of eyes on the job, not just when you're there, but you can go back and look at it. So what our process is this is a job we did. Black was reality. Red was where it was supposed to be. So a lot of people think that when you cut on a job site, you're only cutting that one piece, and it doesn't affect everything else down the road. And so what we did is we went out there, we scanned it, we pulled some quick dimensions, we pulled it into virtual reality, and we actually walked the owner through and showed him that the penetrations were not in the right spot. Couldn't get him out to the job site, but we could get him to sit in his office. And, he was into tech, but if not, we could have just showed him on the screen. But he was able to walk and see that hole was in the wrong spot. The same amount of time it took us to do the field measurements on this size of a job was the same amount of time. We didn't save time, but it was the same amount of time that we had a repeatable image that we could go prove to management and field personnel that what the issue was. So what I talk about stacking technologies on is we then use this internally as a learning lesson, because you can't get to every job site. What do a lot of guys on the job site not like is a whole bunch of students walking around and getting in the way all the time. But also, I can walk through 200 projects now in the office, and I can have a better plan for when I'm out there and I'm learning on the job site. So this is scan of a little retrofit, and I picked this job because this is a small mechanical room, but it shows still that you don't need large projects to make this tech valuable. So this project was about an hour and a half away from our office. We drove there. We set up the scanner 15 times, came back. The end of the second day, we were able to walk through the project. And we were able to work with our customer and the other trades to actually determine what was really coming out of that built room and what was staying in the room. So a lot of times, on the phone, you're like, oh yeah, the gas line's coming out, it's moving. Well, which one? The one on the northeast corridor, close to the mop sink. Oh, okay, really? So this allows you to instantaneously cloud over it, mark it up, and say, hey, this is coming out. So this was the job scanned. This is like us going through the headset where we went in, and now you saw where the pipe was going. And the new equipment. So we were able to take dimensions of the doors to see if it fit in the room. We were able to see what we were going to hit. Do you guys think a scan is 100% accurate? No. You're going to hit something. That's why you're fitters and skilled trades. So you're going to hit something, but we're going to identify where those hits might happen, and we're going to put brakes either in the system. So we're not going to make that into a modular unit, or we're just going to say, hey, you're going to have a problem here. You can see where where you've tied into existing piping. You can run schedules on insulation that you need, all those things, because now it's in the model. In the past, we'd send 2 people out for a couple days. They'd take all the measurements. They'd get a call back from the guy in the field when it was, either the demolition was more or the project was further along with the install, and we'd see how does it fit, and we'd keep going back and forth those manual entries. So doesn't have to be huge projects. From some cost perspectives, typical scan with this minus putting our pipe in, but rendering and stitching everything together, $3,000 back when the Canadian dollar was on par with the US dollar. So maybe like what, $4,000, say $5,000. You can have that. And sometimes bigger jobs are actually less expensive because you're already out there. So if you go out there for...
So this is the scan with your model integrated together?
Mm-hmm. So we took this. So this is Revisto that we're walking around, and Revit that we modeled in and we just overlaid it. And there's an add-in in Revit that you hit export to Revisto, and it will generate this. And then we use Revisto also for either the Oculus or the Vive, the virtual reality. So virtual reality is when you're consumed by it, like you don't know what else you are, you actually feel like you're in the room. Augmented reality is if I had, a pump or chiller or boiler here, and I could then see that the pump would go here, but you still see your surrounding environment. So it's about connecting and utilizing the data. Right now in Revit today, so this says pipe length check. We've gone in and we've talked to all of our top piping guys and our customers' top piping guys, and we said, okay, what are best piping practices? And then Victaulic, because we're a consumer of Autodesk and we're a producer of drawings, we said, hey, there's a little bit of a lag in our industry with piping. Duct, electrical, the MEP trades in Revit. It's great for the architect. It's great for the engineer. It's not always, it hasn't been there. And we switched to Revit 5 years ago. So what we've done is, this is our kickoff meeting. We have 272 questions we ask to start a job. What's your insulation, floor penetrations, pad heights, all the stuff you would do to do a job. But we've said, okay, here's the questions you have to start to do a job. And now where we're at, and we've already used schedules in Revit to say, okay, if it's over a certain length, if a fab spool has a pup piece on it that's greater than 3 feet, it sends a flag. But now what we want to do is we want to say, okay, if the pad was supposed to be 8 inches, and in our kickoff meeting it says 8 inches, but in the model it's 10 inches, we're betaing it right now in our own group, but it will say, hey, there's an issue. Right, so what we have today is we've got one monitor, and you're looking at your document. You got another monitor, and you have to remember to either check it, but the computer's not doing it right now for you. So what we said is, that's crazy. What does that do? That creates a lot of errors or possibilities for errors. So we're working on saying, okay, whatever is written over here will be validated over here, or if you change it in the model and you hit approve, you can change it over in your what we call our Bible, which is our job book. So this is today. This lives and breathes already. This is stuff that not just my team is doing, but other teams are doing to say, okay, let's use this data. Just because it's in one spot doesn't mean it's easily consumed in another spot. And if you look at how you're connecting processes, software, and tooling, I would say there's a couple major players in the industry today doing this. Okay, so the HoloLens, it was cool. No one uses it. We've got some that sit under desks if you want some. But no one uses it. We'd like to use it, but it was a little too hard to use, especially on the job site, because we've got to wear a hard hat. And I'm not going to pay $3,000 for a hard hat that allows me to wear this. But what we're saying is there's a lot of software and tools out there, and how do you know what to buy? How do you know what to use? And that's where things like CanBIM and Autodesk University and Trimble's user group and Building Smart and all these different associations will teach you about them. But how do you create a peer group to help you better understand what you can implement? And that's what we do at Victaulic. So where is the industry now? Fabrication is one of the main reasons why people want it. Well, owners like BIM. Why? Because facilities management. I have yet to be on a BIM project where the owner is actually up front telling us what FM program they're going to use and what they actually want out of it from an MEP side of it. So we hear a lot about it. I'm always looking for that unicorn project that it's existing on. But really from the contractors, from the building, what's making our buildings be going up with less labor? What's allowing our buildings to go up with a greater sense of accuracy? That is off-site manufacturing, or if you call it off-site fabrication. So what we're doing here is, right here, this is Victaulic Tools for Revit. We made the spool, we wrote the spooling program for Autodesk because they didn't have it. And we said, hey, we're not a software company, but this is needed in our industry. And and we'll put it out there for basically a very nominal fee. But we were on a job similar to 414 Light Street where our contractor was fabricating in their shop using a software. And he said, wouldn't it be nice if the people in the office knew what was going on in the fab shop without me having to print or give them a new software? So, you know, the CAD guys are using Revit. That's their number one software, and they're using Bluebeam. The shop guys are using their software. So I said, well, why don't you set up a phone call? We'll talk to them. And what came out of it is this is GTP Stratus's shop program. So this says, was it cut? Was it grooved? Was it assembled? Was it shipped? Now the person in the office, the drawing person, now knows they can't make a change to that without a cost. Because it was cut, it was grooved, it was assembled. What does that help the field do? The fields can say, oh, okay, no problem. I'll handle it in the field. Or the field can say, oh, well, what are the options? And really quick, the office can push it back out to the shop.
Do those talk automatically to each other?
Yep.
Like instantaneous updates?
Mm-hmm. So I think it updates.
You just have to hit update.
You hit update, it syncs. So you have to hit the update button, but as soon as you hit the update button, it will pop up on the screen. There's no like once a day or once every 6 hours. But what you have to do, because no one wants Big Brother, is you have to invite the team members. Yeah. So we were the drawing team. Their shop team invited us to the job, and that's how we were able to test it. Not yet, but we have a meeting next week where we're trying to say, okay, what can the guys in the office do too? So the guys in the office right now, they can go into Stratus and put a hold on it, but not from Revit. So we want ability to put a hold on it, but also too, if we make one piece into two pieces, that it makes it into two pieces over here, and they just accept. So like if you're already like procured and you might need an extra coupling or something, it will just pop up, buy one more coupling or pull one more coupling. So those are some things we're working on. But right now you can see, and instead of the guy calling the shop and the shop saying, oh, let me go check the shop floor, and then the shop floor saying, let me go check with design what can be done, everyone knows right away. And this Stratus can go on your phone too for the guys in the field, so they can see what's going on. But just a quick. So this is just showing that they invited you to, you got invited to. Oh, so you don't have to hit publish anymore. It automatically, yeah, before you had hit publish, but now it doesn't. that's really odd. So what's showing you here is that you can actually search and see what was cut. Or you can search and see what was assembled, or search and see what was welded. Whatever those processes are out in the shop, you can see what's going on, so you know if you can make a change, and if that change affects you financially or just adds more, manpower into the shop. What's interesting about this is 3 years ago this didn't exist, and now this software and other softwares are out there in the industry and at an affordable price point to use in your shop. And what's allowing too is it's allowing some mechanical contractors and standalone fabricators, standalone fabricators, they sell their fab anyways, but some mechanical contractors to understand what their capacity is and to sell that capacity to within the market. So a little bit about, talking about airproofing and what we did to support the industry is we wanted to look at fabrication, but fabrication is not every engineer. Engineers don't fabricate. Some of them actually do, but they don't really do that. But what do we do? What does an engineer do on a day-to-day basis? What does a mechanical contractor drafting team do on a day-to-day basis? They rotate pipe, they resize pipe, they delete pipe. It's all of those different functionalities. And what my team does and what we've built is we've built different programs to go mine the project to see what's connected to what. And then we're seeing how often we do those clicks. And then it allows you to go to your estimating team and your field team and say, okay, would this be a standard assembly? It's already standard because you're already using it a lot. But do you agree to make this a standard product? So either your shop can make them ahead, or someone like a Victaulic can make it into a product. But when I talked about earlier about what's at the base of BIM, what's at the base of a good process, it's that data, it's that content. So really what we've done is we've always been the gold standard for content, but instead of passive where team members have to go to a website or go to an external content host site, what we've done is we said, okay, we'll push it to you. So based on the type of system you're doing, if you're doing a muni project, a fire protection project, a large, AGS is our large diameter product, we will make sure that this and this link. Because what do we all have too much of? Information. There's way too much information out there, and to consume it in a way that you can make a decision in a timely manner is getting harder and harder. So what we've done is we said, okay, you say what system you're going to work on, we're going to make sure that the content for that system pops up. So you're not going to have fire protection on an HVAC system. In the past, and even today, you can anything will connect. So we want to make smart product choices based on best piping practices and based on that basis of estimate that we have. So what we do is to help out is we put templates out there. So we give our Revit template away for free, and it has all of our pipe types in it, and then the content comes with our toolbar, and you can help you get to that Revit journey much, much faster. So you should be able to bring on someone from uni that has, a year technical degree or has maybe taken a couple Revit classes and team them up with someone. They'll know how to model in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They might not understand the piping side of it, but that's why we've said, okay, let's make that easier and say what type of pipe types and products to go with it. So just back to some of the checks that we have, and this pops up on our team screens, is pipes too short. So based on our installation instructions, our tooling, that piece of pipe is too short from a safety perspective. You want to keep your fingers. The pipe's too long. Maybe you're going up a buck hoist or some type of lift, and you can't have the pipe that long. Field cut, plain end, and having really just different pipe end preps, and when you know what product should go to the field and what should go to the shop, and putting standard colors into the system. So depending where you are, what type of pipe. So if it's seamless, we typically put that at 16 feet because the mills give you a little bit of everything. So we've come up with those standard and those default methodologies. And this is all stuff that Revit allows you to do. And then we have different views and filters so that it pops over. So where are we going next? We just launched QR codes on our fab spools so that if you're out on the job site and you have, I think, an iPhone 8 or newer, and you just use the camera, you take a picture of the QR code, and the submittal and the installation instructions will pop up. So eventually, we should have enough videos that a 30-second video of how to trim out the valve or the working pressures of the product will show up too. But it's all about using high tech and low tech together. So giving someone access to that information really fast and quick so that they can troubleshoot on their own. The goal of technology is not to make them have to call somebody in the office, but to be able to give information that's not too much at your, in the point of your hands. So we're working on the videos, and right now too, so if you have a shop and you have a QR code, what we do is we work with each customer to understand what machine, what tooling they have in their shop, and if you have a Lincoln Vernon tool or a Watts, plasma cutter, the QR code will tell the machine what to do. Or you can upload the whole file. So just real quick, it used to take us 6 hours, and this is really where we talk about that change. So it's change management. I've talked about how the estimator and the drafts person are closer than ever before. I talked about how new generations don't want to come into a same workflow that was around forever. It used to take us 6 hours to get data from one system to another system because it wasn't automatic. And we never knew it took 6 hours. We just assumed that, because we knew our replications, but when we actually followed it through the process, on average it took 6 hours before somebody could actually use it in their full state. So what we did is we said, okay, we had a crazy access database that was awesome with data, but it took you 6 hours. And we rewrote the program. So that's really that beginning, implementation, maintenance, and that kill phase. We had to kill the baby.
Sorry, I just want to go back to the QR code. So when you scan your QR code and you have access to your shop drawings and the videos, but where do you store the video? Where do you put them? Is it on your website? Or
yeah, so we're basically taking you a link to our website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can basically go anywhere. It's just a link out.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had to go to our team member that built this for us and say that we appreciated it, we liked it, it was good, it was great, and now it's not so good. Had some change management and had to decide what new language we wanted to write it in. And now we took it over from Access, and I can't remember the language that they picked. But now it's end-to-end project lifecycle management in one system. So we went from Excel-based to database to we wrote a quick program. So what we did is typically in the MEP space, for every 25 users, there's typically some type of an administrator. So I said, well, I don't want one administrator for 25 people. Can I have it one administrator for 40 people? And can I make the administrator a programmer? So I used the same person, same head, but we trained that person to become a programmer, and he loves it. So all your data is in one spot. I can now look up and see where my projects are, how they're going, and it's just the beginning, because I'll tell you this, every day somebody asks me a really cool question and I'm like, I don't have that, but we'll look to see if it's good, and we do it. So just sort of wrapping up, I'm here to always answer any questions that you have about different technologies. I'm not the techie person, but I can put you in touch with one of my team members if you really want to know like what type of, how we've changed our computers and stuff like that. But from a business perspective, I just encourage, all of you guys that are joining our industry, to stay at it. It's a great industry to be in. I love it, and it's always, to see something built or to see something be saved that was built, 100 years ago is amazing. We don't just do the same thing. It's a very challenging environment. But then I also, to people that are in the industry, don't be too worried about the cost of a technology or the change, because we're not taking jobs away. We totally are not. We're only allowing us to do the work that we already have, but there is some reskilling that comes in, and there's definitely some sharing of information that our industry doesn't like to share all the time. And I talk a lot of that mainly internally into individual entities. It's not sharing information externally. So when I started 5 years ago, I said, why don't we just ask the engineer for the Revit model? And my manager said, they'll never give it to us. I said, well, never is a strong word. My mom said, never use never. And today, if it's a Revit job, we about 80% of the time get the Revit model. So what does that allow us to do? We bring in all the backgrounds. We even bring in some of their piping, and it allows us to start right away. We don't have to redraw anything. Not every job is a Revit job, and the projects that we don't get the Revit file, typically we're a little bit more advanced on our Revit journey and say, hey, well, we don't want to use it. But we're here to help you learn, talk about technology. We also, if you're don't want to do it yourself, we're here to help, or we're here to help you find a partner that is right for you.